Hello everyone. Today in this video, I'll show you how to create an Azure HTTP trigger function app with GraphQL. If you need some context about GraphQL basics, I have a 5-minute short video which can make you ready for this, and you can find the video link in the description. But here in this video, this is the sample that I'm going to implement here. We have three entities: students, courses, and grades. And we create a HTTP trigger function app and call it from Postman with different queries to see how it works. Before getting our hands dirty, I'll do a quick demo for you to give you the gist of what we want to build. Alrighty, I have the function app up and running on the right side, and I've got Postman on the left side. So in the function app, I've created an endpoint called student, and it accepts the ID, which is the student ID basically, and it's going to return the student details for us based on the query that we are writing here. So I start with this simple query. I'm asking the GraphQL to return a student with this ID, and we just want to have ID in the output in the result. So if I run that, the result is ID only. Now what I'm going to do is adding more field to that to see what is happening. So if I say give me ID and name, you get name for this student as well. If I say also give me the courses associated to this student, and for each course, we want to have the ID, name, and unit. So you get a list of courses, and each course has got ID, name, and unit. And obviously, this is dynamic again. So if you just remove unit and name, and you send the request, you see you are getting ID back for courses only. So it's completely dynamic. If I add one more query to that, which is great, and say we want to get the overall grade for each grade, and I just send the request. You see that we are getting grades back, and the field that is coming back is overall grade for uh, that student. So this is how it works. So you've got uh, complete flexibility to get the result that you are after from the API, not a bunch of different fields that you don't need them on the front end. And obviously, if you put the breakpoint in the Azure Function app, you see that if you've got different resolvers for each of these parts, like for a student or for courses or for grades, if they are not in query, they are not called. So it doesn't put unnecessary load on your backend for getting the, unrelated data for you. All right, so let's get our hand dirty now and start implementing this function app. Okay, I create Azure Function project in Visual Studio. I use .NET 8, and it's a HTTP trigger, and we click on create. Once the project is created, the first step is adding two new get package to the project. So we go to the new get package. The first one is GraphQL. The second one is GraphQL system text JSON. Both of them are installed. Now I create our model classes. So I add a folder to the project, call it model. I add a class to that, student. So to make the demo video quicker, I just copy and paste the code from my previous project. And then we go through the code. Just pin this one. Okay. So I created two different classes, student, course, and grade. Students got ID and name and a list of courses and list of grades. And course got ID, name, and unit, and grades got ID, course ID, and overall grade. So I think it's self-explanatory. Uh, I put all of these classes in one file, as you can see, but if you like, you can just put them in different files. But just for this demo purposes, I just put it in one file. The next one is adding a student type class. And again, I copy and paste the code. We need to tell the GraphQL engine how our student class looks like. So I just create a student type class, and it needs to base object graph type with a student as a generic parameter. And then we've got a constructor for that. In the constructor, we are just defining what properties we have in the student. So if you look at the student class, we've got ID, name, courses, and grades. And in a student type, we are doing the same thing. We are just defining that for GraphQL engine. We say the field ID and just add a description for that. This can be whatever you want, and name the same. But for these two fields, it's a little bit more complex because they are referring to the other objects and other classes. So we need to just use add field method, and we give it a name. This name is uh, what you want to use in your query. Give it a description, doesn't matter what that is. And the resolver type needs to be from the um, type classes that you are creating. So I've created one for a student type. We need to create one for course type and one for grade type as well. So I'll copy and paste that code as well. Again, I'll put all these in one file, where we can put them in different files. So for the grade and for the course, it's easier because you don't have reference to any other objects. They are just a string and integer types or properties. So as you can see, you just define that field and give it a description for each of the course type and grade type. And I come back to here for the student type. Now the resolve type is a type of course type, and the resolver is the method that is called when this uh, phrase is appearing in the query. And when the um, query includes grades, this piece of code is run as a resolver. So basically, when we've got those stuff in the query, based on that query, different resolvers are called and data is populated and returned to the consumer. If I want to quickly explain what the first resolver is doing, we are saying that this is going to be a list of course as a return value for this resolver, and we are checking that if our query includes courses, we are only just populating data. If it's not including courses, this resolver is not calling that method, and we don't put unnecessary load on our database or on our service calls. So here I'm just calling a different service and populating data from there. This might be your database service, or if you are calling another REST API service or a uh, web service or another data source, you can just wrap it in a service class and then call it here. So for that, I'm just going to create the service class quickly here. So I add a folder, call it service, and add a class, paste the code here. So what I've added in this student service class basically is three different methods. The first method is accepting a ID, which is the student ID, and it's returning a dummy student. Get a student courses is accepting again a student ID, and it's returning two courses as a mock data. And for get a student grades, we are doing the same thing. We are just returning two grades uh, as a dummy data. And as you can see here in this comment, in real scenarios, we basically need to populate this data from a database or from any data sources that we want to get data from there. Okay. Now if I go back to student type and just include this using in our code, it's gonna work. Next step, I'll add a new folder here, call it GraphQL, and add a class, call it GraphQL Query Resolver. It needs to base object graph type. It's important. And we've got a constructor for this class, which is accepting ID, and this is the student ID basically. Then here we are defining our resolvers. So for the first one, uh, this is for testing your API as a simple test. We say that if you are seeing hello in the query, you just return word. So you get the hello word in the return value. But for more complex type, if you see a student in the query and its properties matching the student type, then run this piece of code. So what it does basically, it's creating an object from the student service and then calling get a student with this ID and then populating the student fields and properties with the return value from service. Obviously, we need to use dependency injection in proper implementation, but for this demo and for simplicity, I'm just newing up the student service object here and just call that get a student and just populate data for the student. Just bear in mind that in your GraphQL query resolver class, when you are writing resolver, um, for the simple properties, you just write the resolver in the query resolver class. And for the complex one, uh, you use the type class. So as you can see, we add the resolver here. When I say complex type, if the type is referring to another class, it's a kind of complex. If we look at the student, here ID and name are simple type as a string, but for courses and grades, there are a list of other classes. So for these two, we need to just write a custom resolver in our type class. And for the simple properties like ID and name, we just put the resolver in the resolver class like this. Now I add another class to the GraphQL folder. This is for processing our query. So in this class, we've got a query method, which is accepting a student ID and query that is coming from consumer app or from Postman or wherever that you are calling this method. And it's returning a string in JSON format, which is your result. So what we are doing here, we are just newing up the query resolver class, which we created in the previous step, this one. And then we pass it to the schema object, which is from type of iSchema. And then we are calling the execute method by passing the query that we are getting from front end to that execute method. And in this piece of code, we are just parsing the result, which is coming back from the J, um, GraphQL engine, and if it's um, including any error, we are throwing exception. If there is no error, we just return the JSON result back to the caller of this class. And finally, we just hook this up to our HTTP trigger function app. So I'm going to just rename that first. So rename it to GraphQL server. Come here. Here I have updated the route of this function app to accept the ID for the student, which is our student ID basically, and we just get that here as a parameter. Then in first line, we are just reading the body of the HTTP message and put it in the query, which is our query. And then we call the query async method from JQL query that we created in the previous step here. We pass the ID and query to that. And then at the end, we just returning that JSON result to the caller. So that's pretty much that. I'm not gonna just test it again because I show that in the demo part, but I'm gonna show you something else in here, which is calling with the hello query, and also put a breakpoint here in the code and show you that if we don't have a property in the query, it's not going to call the resolver that is related to that one. So bear with me for a sec. Okay, I go to the student service class and put breakpoint in each of this method. And then I just run it in debug mode. Now function app is up and running. So I just open up Postman and I use this function app method URL. So I need to change this to 7017. And as you can see in the body, we choose text and raw from Postman settings. Then you can put your query here and have a play with that. So I'm going to start with hello to see what's happening. So if I send hello, just grab this up. As you can see, hello world is returned as a result, and none of the breakpoints called for hello world. Now, if I replace the query, and I'm gonna just get rid of this part, so just call it for a student. Okay, as you can see, this breakpoints hit for getting a student because we've got ID and name. If I let it go, goes back to the postman, and you see that the result is returned. So none of the other method for getting courses or for getting grades called because we've got breakpoint here as well. If I add, for example, courses to that, send the request again, get a student is called. Now this time get a student courses is called as well. If I let it go, it returns the value. And finally, if I add grades as well, send the request, get a student is called, get a student courses is called, get a student grades is called, and a full result is populated. Alrighty, hopefully it's been clear enough, and thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Thank you.